Picture this man. You're at a high-end restaurant and you notice her across the room. Stunning. The kind of beauty that stops conversations mid-sentence. She's with a different guy than the one you saw her with last week at the coffee shop. And the week before that, another man entirely. Your mind immediately jumps to conclusions, doesn't it? What if everything you believe about this situation is completely backwards? Here at Brutal Relationship, we don't sugarcoat the uncomfortable truths about modern dating and human behaviour. Today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood patterns in attraction. The connection between physical beauty and romantic patterns isn't what society tells you. In fact, the real reasons behind this phenomenon have nothing to do with character and everything to do with psychology, opportunity, and a paradox that most people never consider. Let me walk you through what's actually happening beneath the surface. Consider this for a moment. When someone is exceptionally attractive, their daily reality operates on a completely different frequency than everyone else's. I'm talking about a lived experience where romantic and intimate opportunities present themselves constantly, without any effort required. Grocery store, 3 people strike up conversations, coffee run, 2 phone numbers slip across the counter, walking to your car, someone finds a reason to chat. Most people overlook this crucial point. We're not discussing lower standards or weak impulse control. We're examining existence within an entirely different ecosystem of options. Imagine you love Italian food, but you only have access to one Italian restaurant in your entire city. You'd probably develop loyalty to that place, right? Now imagine living in Rome, where 500 incredible Italian restaurants exist within walking distance. Your relationship with any single restaurant fundamentally transforms. Exceptionally attractive women exist in that second reality when it comes to romantic prospects. The sheer volume of opportunities creates a different decision-making framework entirely. Research from evolutionary psychology shows that when humans have abundant options, our selection criteria actually becomes more specific. We start optimizing for exact preferences rather than accepting good enough. There's a twist that nobody discusses. This abundance creates something psychologists call choice overload. Studies from Columbia University demonstrated that when people face excessive choices, they actually become less satisfied with whatever they select, because they're always wondering about the alternatives they passed up. How does this apply to your situation? If you're trying to build something meaningful with someone who has endless options, recognize that you're not competing on looks alone. You're competing on depth, on the quality of experience you provide, on your ability to create moments that can't be replicated by the next person waiting. Consider what makes you genuinely irreplaceable, not just appealing. Take a breath and absorb this next part. Now we need to address something even more uncomfortable. When you've been told your entire life that your primary value stems from your appearance, something strange happens to your psychology. You become dependent on external validation in ways that people who weren't raised in that spotlight simply can't comprehend. Pay attention to this. Imagine growing up where every achievement, every social interaction, every compliment revolves around how you look. Teachers smile at you more warmly. Strangers go out of their way to help you. Friends tell you you're lucky to be so beautiful. Your social media posts get thousands of likes. On the surface, this sounds like paradise. Underneath, it's building a foundation made of sand. Rachel, a 31-year-old consultant I know, once shared something that perfectly captures this reality. She said, "I realized I had no idea who I was without someone desiring me. It was like my sense of self only existed in other people's eyes." She wasn't cycling through relationships because she was shallow. She was seeking constant confirmation that she still had value, and the only value she'd been taught to recognize was her ability to attract desire. This creates what psychologists call an external locus of identity. Your sense of worth doesn't come from within. It comes from others' reactions to you. And the harsh reality, physical attraction is immediate and intense, but it fades faster than any other form of connection. So you need increasingly frequent hits of that validation just to feel stable. It's not about intimacy. It's about feeling real. The complexity deepens from there. The research on this is fascinating. Dr. Jean Twenge's work on narcissism and social media shows that people who receive validation primarily for physical attributes actually develop more fragile self-esteem than those who receive recognition for accomplishments or character. They need more frequent reinforcement because they subconsciously understand that their source of value is temporary and superficial. How do you address this if you recognize this pattern in yourself or someone you care about? The answer isn't judgment, it's building alternative sources of identity and worth. Start recognizing achievements, personality traits, skills, and values in yourself or in them. Create experiences together that have nothing to do with physical attraction. The goal is to build an identity that exists independent of desire. Nobody talks about this part. When relationships come too easily, you never develop the skills that make them last. Consider this carefully. Most people learn relationship skills through trial, error, and necessity. They learn to communicate clearly because miscommunication costs them connections. They learn patience because walking away means starting from scratch. They learn compromise because their options are limited. When you're exceptionally attractive, many of these developmental pressures simply don't exist. Arguments? Someone new is already expressing interest. Communication breakdown? There are 10 other people who seem easier to talk to. The relationship requires work. Why bother when starting fresh feels effortless? Listen to how this actually plays out in practice. David, someone I know who dated a model for 2 years, described it like this. Every time we hit a rough patch, I could see her mentally checking out. Not because she didn't care, but because she'd never had to push through difficulty before. In her experience, relationships were either effortless or over. She genuinely didn't know there was a middle stage where you actually build something. This isn't about moral shortcomings. It's about what psychologists call contingent learning. We learn behaviors based on what our environment rewards. If your environment has always rewarded starting new connections and never required you to maintain difficult ones, you literally haven't developed the neural pathways for relationship maintenance. The data supports this observation. Research from UCLA's relationship lab shows that people who report having many romantic options score significantly lower on measures of relationship maintenance behaviors like constructive conflict resolution, emotional regulation during disagreements, and long-term commitment follow-through. It's not that they're deficient. They're working with an underdeveloped skill set. Notice the pattern. Short relationships mean fewer opportunities to develop depth skills, which leads to more short relationships. Without intervention, this pattern can continue for decades. I've met women in their 40s still stuck in this loop, genuinely confused about why they can't maintain long-term connections, despite having no shortage of interested partners. How do you break this cycle? If you're the attractive person, in this scenario you need to consciously choose to develop these skills even when you don't have to. Stay in conversations past the point of comfort. Work through disagreements instead of walking away. Choose depth over novelty, deliberately and repeatedly, until new neural pathways form. If you're pursuing someone with this pattern, understand that you might need to teach by example, while being patient with gaps in their relationship skill development. Pause and absorb this next concept. Now we need to discuss something that makes people really uncomfortable. Power dynamics. When you're highly attractive, you hold a specific kind of social power that fundamentally changes every interaction you have, and like any form of power, it affects how you relate to other people. Consider this scenario. You're negotiating a business deal, but you know the other person desperately needs what you're offering and you have multiple other buyers lined up. How do you negotiate, probably with more confidence, less anxiety, and more willingness to walk away if things aren't perfect? You're operating from a position of abundance, and that changes everything about your behavior. Attractive women in the dating market experience this exact dynamic constantly. They hold the power of choice, and that power creates behavioral patterns that others interpret as promiscuity, but are actually strategic resource management. From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, this makes perfect sense. When you have abundant access to a resource, Your optimization strategy shifts from acquisition to selection. There's an unexpected consequence. This power also creates isolation. Dr. Vivian Diller's research on beauty and psychology reveals something counterintuitive. Highly attractive people often report feeling lonely and misunderstood. Why? Because power creates distance. When people approach you as a prize to be won rather than a person to be known, genuine connection becomes nearly impossible. The harsh reality. Many attractive women cycle through relationships not because they're seeking novelty, but because they're searching for someone who sees past the power dynamic to the actual person underneath. Each new connection holds the promise of, maybe this person will be different, but the pattern repeats because the power imbalance poisons authenticity from the start. I know a woman named Jennifer who put it perfectly. Every relationship starts with them wanting to possess me, not know me. By the time I realize they're more interested in having me than understanding me, I'm already emotionally checked out and looking for someone who might actually care about who I am. How do you navigate this? If you're pursuing an attractive person, you need to consciously reject the power dynamic. Stop trying to win them. Start trying to understand them. Ask questions that have nothing to do with their appearance. Show interest in their thoughts, their struggles, their boring Tuesday, afternoon problems. Treat them like you'd treat someone you respect, not someone you're trying to capture. Most people completely miss this angle. Sometimes what looks like promiscuity is actually a defensive strategy against vulnerability. Stay with me, because this is where things get psychologically complex. When you're attractive, you learn early that people want something from you. They want your time, your attention, your body, your association, your validation. You become hyper-aware that most interactions have an agenda. This creates what psychologists call hypervigilance around others' motivations. You're constantly scanning for the hidden transaction. Consider what this does to your ability to trust. Every kind gesture might have an ulterior motive. Every compliment might be manipulation. Every expression of interest might just be someone wanting to add you as a conquest to their story. Over time, this creates deep cynicism about human connection. Notice this pattern. 1. Way to protect yourself from this constant vigilance is to control the terms of engagement entirely. If relationships are surface level and temporary, you never have to discover whether someone actually cares about you or just wants you. You never have to risk real vulnerability. You never have to face the devastating possibility that someone you opened up to was only interested in the package, not the person. Let me illustrate how this plays out. Consider fortress walls. They keep invaders out, but they also keep defenders in. Multiple brief relationships become the emotional equivalent of fortress walls, protection that also creates isolation. The psychological term for this is avoidant attachment through strategic superficiality. Dr. Philip Shaver's attachment research reveals that people who fear emotional intimacy often manage this fear through quantity over quality in relationships. More partners, less depth with each. It looks like promiscuity from the outside, but it's actually systematic risk management from the inside. Each brief connection is safe because nothing is really at stake. The complexity intensifies. This defensive strategy often develops after one or two experiences where vulnerability was punished. Maybe they opened up to someone who later admitted they were primarily interested in the physical aspect. Maybe they trusted someone who then objectified them to their friends. Once burned, they built walls, and those walls manifest as serial surface connections. How do you address this if you recognize this pattern? Healing this requires consistent proof that depth won't be punished. Small acts of seeing the person, not the appearance. Remembering details that have nothing to do with attraction. Showing up for the unglamorous moments. Essentially, you need to demonstrate through repeated action that your interest survives past the physical into the realm of actual human connection. Understand this isn't a quick fix. Walls built over years don't come down in weeks. Absorb this for a moment. Now we need to address something that takes this conversation in a different direction entirely. Neuroscience. Your brain on attraction and novelty is literally experiencing chemical changes that affect decision-making in ways most people don't realize. When you experience new attraction, your brain floods with dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in ways that are functionally similar to substance use. I'm not exaggerating. fMRI studies from Rutgers University show that the brain regions activated during new romantic attraction overlap significantly with addiction patterns. What does this mean practically? When you're highly attractive and constantly experiencing new attraction from others, you're getting regular hits of these neurochemicals. Over time, your brain's reward system calibrates to this level of stimulation. Long-term relationships, by definition, involve reduced novelty. That chemical cocktail decreases, and your brain interprets this as something being wrong. Consider this carefully. You're not choosing novelty because you're morally deficient. Your brain is literally craving the neurochemical state it's become accustomed to. This is why attractive people often describe long-term relationships as feeling boring or flat. Their baseline chemical state has been recalibrated to novelty-induced highs. There's a fascinating twist. Dr. Helen Fisher's research on long-term love shows that committed relationships actually produce different chemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin, which create feelings of attachment and calm rather than excitement. These are equally valid neurochemical rewards, but they feel completely different. If you've trained your brain to crave dopamine spikes, oxytocin can feel like nothing. Let me paint a picture of what this looks like in real life. Consider someone who grew up drinking energy drinks all day. Regular water seems bland and unsatisfying by comparison, even though water is what the body actually needs. The taste buds have been trained to expect intense stimulation. Relationship neurochemistry works the same way. The harsh reality. Breaking this pattern requires intentionally going through a neurochemical recalibration period that feels awful. It's similar to what addiction recovery specialists call emotional sobriety. You have to tolerate lower stimulation states while your brain slowly adjusts to finding reward in attachment chemistry rather than attraction chemistry. How do you navigate this? If you're stuck in this pattern, recognize that the boredom you feel in stable relationships isn't a sign that something's wrong with the relationship. It's a sign that your reward system needs recalibration. This requires conscious choice to stay through the discomfort while your neurochemistry adjusts. Typically, this takes about 3 to 6 months of consistent behavior. If you're with someone in this pattern, understand that their restlessness isn't about you. It's about their internal chemistry. Support the recalibration process rather than taking it personally. Everything we've discussed converges into one central insight. The hidden truth isn't actually about beauty or promiscuity at all. It's about how exceptional circumstances create exceptional psychology. When you're highly attractive, you're operating in a reality that most people never experience. The opportunity volume, the validation patterns, the power dynamics, the defensive strategies, and the neurochemistry all combine to create a unique psychological ecosystem. Behaviors that look like moral failings from the outside are often logical adaptations to these exceptional circumstances from the inside. Consider what this means. We judge these patterns through the lens of average experience, but average frameworks don't apply to outlier realities. It's like judging someone raised by wolves for not having table manners. The environment shaped the adaptation. The most beautiful women don't have different relationship patterns because beauty correlates with moral deficiency. They have different relationship patterns because beauty creates a fundamentally different social and psychological reality that makes traditional relationship progression nearly impossible without conscious intervention. Let me outline the path forward. If you're the attractive person struggling with these patterns, awareness is your starting point. You need to consciously choose skill development over ease, depth over novelty, and long-term neurochemical recalibration over short-term dopamine hits. None of this happens automatically. Your environment won't pressure you to change, so change has to be internally motivated. If you're pursuing or in relationship with someone navigating these patterns, your role is understanding without enabling. Don't accept surface-level connection, but also don't judge harshly for patterns that developed logically within their reality. Push for depth while providing safety for vulnerability. Be patient with skill gaps while maintaining your own boundaries and standards. Nobody tells you this. The most successful relationships involving highly attractive people happen when both parties consciously choose to operate differently than their circumstances allow them to. The attractive person chooses constraint and depth despite abundant options. The partner chooses confidence and security despite power imbalances. Both choose to build something that their individual ecosystems don't naturally create. This isn't easy. It requires swimming against strong currents of psychology, biology, and social dynamics. Understanding these forces is the first step to not being controlled by them. Beauty creates complexity, but complexity isn't destiny. It's just the landscape you're navigating. The question isn't whether beautiful women are more promiscuous. The question is whether people operating in unique, psychological ecosystems can consciously create outcomes different from their default patterns. And the answer to that is always yes, but only through awareness, intentionality, and consistent choice over time. That's the hidden truth that changes everything once you see it. The patterns aren't the problem. The lack of understanding about why the patterns exist is the problem. Now you understand. What you do with that understanding is entirely up to you.